Michael Costello, trustee, fireman, reluctant Star Wars victim, on December 16th, 2016, he told Medina County's Finest how he stumbled onto a bloodbath at the township building. Fast forward 3 years, and the BCI had their turn. But memories are funny. Sometimes they age like wine, sometimes they age like milk. Let's see which one this is. Before we start peeling back the layers on today's nonsense, a quick reminder for Tentacle Nation. If you like real investigations that aren't sugarcoated, whitewashed, or blessed by county PR departments, you can find the infamous ex-chief everywhere: YouTube, Rumble, Apple Podcast, all neatly packed into one link, which QR code I will put right here. Click it, bookmark it, live it. You'll also find ways to reach me directly: email, check, Signal, absolutely. Want to leave a voicemail because you're fired up or found something they didn't want you to see? That's what SpeakPipe is for. And if you appreciate all the digging, the public records warfare, and the hours of making sure the official story gets fact-checked into oblivion, you can support the show. Donate. Help keep things going. Be part of shaking the system until the truth falls out. Last but not least, jump into our Discord. That's where the real conversations happen. It's not for the thin-skinned, but if you're here, I doubt that's you. Now, look, let's be fair. Time passes, memories fade, I get it. 3 years in between interviews, sure, you might forget exactly what you were drinking, which jacket you threw on, or whether you stepped 1 foot into a blood-soaked room. That's human. And let's not ignore this: how a question is asked can absolutely change how you answer it. The Medina County boys might ask one way, BCI ask another, and suddenly a detail you brushed off 3 years ago pops back up. But here's the thing. There's a difference between memory gaps and total rewrites. We're not talking about what shirt you wore. We're talking about boot prints, bloody scenes, phantom phone calls from dead guys, and major revelations that change the entire tone of the story. Now, in fairness, the part about the FBI pulling his phone records, he probably wouldn't have known about that in 2016. That's an investigative detail that hadn't occurred during the initial interview. But what raises eyebrows is how that phone call, originally described as some angry resident, suddenly gets reimagined as Bryon himself, spoofing a call from beyond the grave. That's not a memory jog, that's a narrative pivot. So while I'll always give someone room for a genuine lapse, what we're seeing here feels more like a story evolving for convenience, not clarity. So again, I'm going to give you what I thought some contradictions were. You can feel free. I'm not, again, trying to lead you down a path to follow my lead. All right? These are just things that I picked up on. Feel free to acknowledge them. Feel free to throw them on the ground and say you have no idea what you're talking about. These are what I picked up. In 2016, Costello says Rick Evans called him at 7:20 a.m. He claims he was asleep on his couch, got up, threw on jeans, boots, jacket, and flew down here. Simple, direct, groggy. But when BCI asked in 2019, suddenly it's a different scene. Mike's awake, drinking hot chocolate, watching the morning news in his boxers, already planning to brush his teeth in 10 minutes. Rick's call? Now it's portrayed as panicked, with Rick dropping an F-bomb and uneasiness in his voice. That little detail didn't exist in 2016. So which is it, Mike? Half asleep trustee scrambling out the door, or relaxed trustee annoyed his hot cocoa break got interrupted? Because those two versions aren't the same scene. In 2016, Mike said he went into the building, pulled his gun, cleared rooms. But when asked if he entered the conference room, you know, the one with all the blood, his answer was, "I don't think I did." His focus? Finding people, not inspecting blood. Flash forward to 2019, and suddenly Mike remembers bloody footprints leading out the front door, Chairs knocked over, Bryon's coat on the floor, lights on, doors ajar, painting a vivid scene that strangely slipped his mind in 2016. So in 3 years, the room he didn't go into suddenly gave him all kinds of details. Amazing what time or a second chance at telling a story will do. "2016 Mike, he gets a call post-election from Jack from Egypt Road. Angry, profane. Claims the township is corrupt for getting its fire station. Mike jots down the address. Linda confirms, yep, that guy's dead. 2019 Mike. Same call, but now it's a twist. The FBI and sheriff's office allegedly pulled his phone records and found that no record of any call existed. Mike then floats a new theory. It was probably Bryon himself spoofing the call. From random pissed off resident to Bryon playing prank caller. That's not a subtle shift. That's a 180. In 2016, Mike tells investigators Bryon was going to wear his gun the day of the incident. Never actually saw it, but assumed it was in a soft-sided planter he carried. But in 2019, the story expands. Victoria flat out tells Mike there are no guns in this house. Mike seems surprised. Suddenly, Bryon's tales of AR-15s and carrying concealed weapons are looking rather shaky. No guns, no safe, no proof. In 2016, Mike assumed. In 2019, Mike's assumptions are being walked back by reality. Basics stay the same. Township party, Bryon begs Mike to see Star Wars. Mike reluctantly agrees, but the mood shifts in the retelling. 2016 Mike, he was doing a buddy a favor. No big deal. Bryon wanted Mike at the township the next morning to hang out. 2019 Mike, suddenly Bryon wanted him to bring his gun. There's talk of Jim Sanford, a deputy, hiding in a closet. Rick helping stage cars. A whole operation. Oh, and Bryon asked Mike to call Victoria to verify his alibi because his phone was dead. Mike even gets a hair on the back of his neck moment in the theater. None of this was mentioned in 2016. What was a simple, yeah, I'll tag along, has now been retrofitted into a covert prelude to ambush. All right, enough of me teeing this up. You've seen how the story shifts. You've seen where the details evolve. But don't just take my word for it. Let's go straight to the source. We're going to roll through Michael Costello's interview with BCI. If you'd like to hear the original interview with Medina County, we've already had an episode about that. I'll link it in the description below. Listen close. The words might be his, but it's the difference that tell the real story. This is where you start to hear how a trustee's recollection gets a little more curated over time. Disclaimer, not accusing a crime, just watching stories change. Now, before anyone gets their waders in a twist, let me be clear. Not accusing Michael Costello of committing a crime. There's no evidence of that. What I am pointing out is the curious case of how everyone tied to this mess seems to suffer from the same condition. Selective storytelling with a touch of post-production. From Linda Bowers inserting herself into moments where she wasn't part of, to Costello's evolving recollections that get more polished with each retelling. It's like the entire township held a creative writing workshop. As for what's really going on between Linda and Michael, I'll leave that up to you, Tentacle Nation. Maybe it's small town politics, maybe it's egos, or maybe, just maybe, it's a lot easier to smooth out the edges of a story when nobody was supposed to ask the questions this long after the fact. All right, we're going back into Otter relative to this. I don't know, I seem to like Otter more than I like the Noda, so... we're going to go through. Again, I'm going to try not to interrupt this interview. I'm going to do my best. All right, so here we go.
Okay, I got tape recorder on. I'm going to record it.
All right.
Let's see where I'm at here. The time now is 3:34 p.m. and it is March 26th, Wednesday, 2019. I'm Charlie Snyder. I'm a special agent with Ohio BCI. We're presently at the Lafayette Township Administrative Building. We're in a conference room. Present with me at this time is Mike Costello. Michael? What do you go by, Mike?
Michael. The residents know me as Mike, but Michael is my legal name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I call you Mike?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Mike, you're a township trustee for Lafayette Township, is that correct? And how long have you been in that position?
I'm in my 6th year, so that would have been since 2013.
Okay. And part of that time, as a township trustee, you got to work with Bryon Macron, who was a township trustee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess probably the easiest way to get started off is why don't you tell me about your experience with Bryon up and through time that he disappeared, and any information that you have you may think is relevant to my investigation.
I first met Bryon right after he was appointed trustee the first time. Trustee stepped down, so they did an appointment, the 2 trustees at the time, and that's how he got on the board.
2009, 2010, something like that?
Sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds about right. First time I met him, I was a volunteer fireman and EMT on the fire department at the time, and we were en route to a barn fire, and there was a guy sitting across from me in the fire engine, and I said, might want to start getting your shit on. We're going to be here to this fire soon, and you're going to do some work. And he said, oh, I'm not fighting any fire. And I said, well, what are you doing on this truck? And he said, I'm Bryon Macron, the new trustee. So that was how I met him. And then, he was very friendly with the fire department. He would stop by on a regular basis, just come in, see how things were going, what was going on, what the issues were, if there were any, how he could help the fire department, how the trustees could help the fire department.
Did he go on many fire runs? Or was that a common thing for him to do?
It wasn't common that he would ride on the apparatus, but he would show up on occasion because I think he had a pager at the time.
Okay.
So he would show up. And then I don't remember if it was about that time that we started getting the calls sent to the trustees' phones as well. So all the fire guys get it via pager as well as phone for a backup. And the trustees, we all have the calls coming to our phone. So we can at least be aware of what's going on.
No, the fire department is completely volunteer fire department.
No, they're paid part-time and volunteer.
Paid part-time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they staff 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then they're on call they staff from 6 a.m. till 6 p.m., and then they're on call from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m.
Okay.
From home.
Okay.
And then he really encouraged me to run for trustee, because there was a trustee on the board that really wasn't pulling her weight, wasn't doing a good job in his opinion. So I decided to run for trustee, and he really encouraged that and was willing to help me however he could in the campaign, and I ran for office, got elected. So I was just doing fingers on my hand here. So I was elected in 13, but I didn't take office till 14.
Okay.
So that'd be 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I'm in my 6th year. So yeah. And when I got on, Bryon had an interesting way of just looking at things from different angles than many other people do. He was very, I don't know if practical is the right word, but he would just sometimes see things from a different angle and kind of a not politically correct, not going to sugarcoat anything. This is the way it is. This is what we're doing. And even if it was something out of left field, that's the way he felt it was going to, going to be happening, or the way to handle it. That's what he wanted. And once his mind was made up, his mind was made up.
Okay.
So probably, you don't have timelines to any of this stuff because you don't think you're going to have timelines to any of this stuff. But probably about a year and a half before he went missing, we started noticing, I don't know if it was a year and a half, definite decrease in participation from him.
As for
being a trustee.
As his position as a trustee?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that would include not coming to meetings and...
Not hearing them from him from days to weeks on end. I mean, because usually the trustees, we all talk, just touch base every few days.
Yeah.
Anything going on that I need to know about or anything like that. So...
Had there ever been discussions with him about why that was occurring?
Just he said that it was his travel for work. That he told us that he had switched jobs a couple times. I can think of at least 2 job changes since I had been a trustee with him. Excuse me. And Yeah, that he would either have to go out of the country or he would be down in the southwest area of the country for a while, because that's where one of the companies was supposedly based. Or jewelry show season. He'd be like, oh, I'm out at this big jewelry show, or particularly around the holidays, he would say he would travel and go and work in different stores trying to promote his line with the sales reps, whatever you call them, at a jewelry store.
Okay, the retail sales.
Yeah.
Okay. And how about the closer it gets to when he disappeared? What did you notice any changes in his personality or anything that kind of struck you as peculiar now that you look back at it?
Oh yeah, lots of stuff. So probably, again, you don't think to establish timelines, as life is going on to different things until an event like this happens. So I don't know, maybe 4 weeks before, he started telling me about phone calls that he was getting from an angry resident that, just wanted to meet with him and said he was going to kill him, said, they were going to have it out. It was over the fire station. He's like, I wonder if they have me confused with you. And he's like, you're the fireman. I would think you'd be getting all the grief about the fire station. And he was telling me that his wife had overheard some of these calls and it was making her very uncomfortable. And I said, well, have you reported it to the sheriff's office? And he's like, I'm not reporting this to the sheriff's office. I can handle this myself. And then I got a phone call on election night. So it was the election night that Trump won. So I stayed up very, very, very late, like till probably 3 a.m. And I got a call after midnight. I can't tell you the time off the top of my head. I'm sure it's in the sheriff report that I gave them, but it was an angry resident, and he opened up the call with something along the lines of, congratulations, motherfucker, you're getting your new fire station. And I said, well, I'm not getting a fire station. The township and the residents are getting it, because that's with the election also that we voted on the levy to fund and build the fire station. And he said, I'm sure next you're going to want to make that a full-time fire department and make yourself the fire chief. And I said, I have no desire in this becoming a full-time fire department anytime soon. The volume just isn't there. The money isn't there. So it got to be a pretty heated phone call. And he answered and he said, he started with the call with, this is Jack from blank, from I think it was Egypt Road. Congratulations, motherfucker, you're getting your fire station. So near the end of the call, it got so profane on his behalf that I said, you know what, Jack? I said, we're not going to do this tonight. We're not going to do this anytime with this type of language. I said, so why don't you give me a call tomorrow when you cooled off a little bit, or call our secretary and schedule some time to meet with me, and you're welcome to come in. We can talk about this. I said, but I'm not having this type of discussion on the phone with this language at this hour of the day. And right before the call ended, I said, Jack, can I get your last name? And he says, yeah, it's blank. And I said, okay. I'm like, I've heard that name before. So I write it down on a little pad that I had next to my bed. And the next morning I called Linda and I said, Jack blank. I said, got a phone call from him. He was all wired up last night. And she goes, really? And then I said, yeah. And she said, well, that's interesting. And I said, why? And she said, he's been dead about 8 years. And I said, okay. And
do you have caller ID, or did you?
It came to my cell phone and it showed unavailable.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other weird thing is, Medina Sheriff pulled my phone records. They said the FBI pulled my phone records, and they have no record of the call. I've got notes of it. I've got, the sheriff's office has my note that I wrote down his name and address, and I think I put the time on there that I came in, and they took that as evidence. But yeah, they said that they had no record of the call, and I have no way of proving it. But if we had a way to prove it, I would bet my 401ks, my house, my car that it was Bryon.
Is that right?
I mean,
did it sound like it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it really did.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did it sound like they were trying to alter the voice?
Yeah, it sounded like they were trying to alter it.
You can tell a lot of times when you talk to somebody by their mannerisms and by the way they pronounce words and the sentence structure and stuff like that. But you think it was probably Bryon that called you?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I sure do.
What happened after that?
Nothing really. His stories continued about this guy wanting to meet up with him and kick his ass. And
now, had he told you about this guy before that?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Can't say for sure, but I think so.
Okay. Did he say how he was planning on handling handling this caller?
He told him to come on over to his house. He's got AR-15s, and come on over. We'll take care of this like men. And I was like, okay. I said, you really ought to let the sheriff's office know.
What did he say about that?
I've told him. So one time it was, I haven't told him, I can handle it on my own. Then it was, they're aware of it. So.
Okay. So kind of inconsistent what he was saying about that.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. He said he was a Marine. He's like, I can handle myself. And he would always allude to, Linda and I have concealed carry permits. We have weapons on us 90% of the time when we're traveling around. So he always carried this little portfolio with him. And I was always like, what's in there? And he says, that's where I keep my concealed weapon. And I'm like, okay. And, you've probably been over to our meeting room, and there we've got kind of a horseshoe almost, if you will, of desks and folding chairs, and there's paneling in front of our legs, so you can't see our legs. But he would always have it leaned up against his chair and just kind of like smirk and wink and pat on this thing. And I always thought, all right, that's where he's got his gun. If he needs it, it's going to be a while to get that thing unzipped to get it out of it.
Did you ever see his gun?
Never.
You've never ever seen a gun?
Never.
Did you ever see his AR-15s?
Never.
Okay.
Never. In fact, the day he disappeared, I went over there. We were all over there late in the evening, and I asked his wife, I said, Victoria, did he have his gun with him? And she said, he doesn't. I said, did he take his gun with him? And she said, he doesn't have a gun. And I said, sure he does. I said, it's in that planner thing is where he keeps it. And she says, that's the planner. And I said, no, he swore to me. And, he'd asked to see my gun many times.
Did you ever actually handle your gun?
No.
Okay.
No.
They just asked to look at it. But okay, that's interesting. Okay.
Yep. I would pull it, drop the mag, clear it, and show it to him. But I don't recall him ever putting it in his hands.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Victoria herself told you that no, it's just a planner. There's no gun in there.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I said, well,
was the planner there after he disappeared?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But I asked her, I said, sure, he's got guns. I said, he's told me about his AR-15s down in the basement in the gun safe. And she's like, that's where he keeps his stuff for work. And I said, no, he told me he's got 3 AR-15s down there. She's like, there are no guns in this house, Mike. I just jotted down some notes earlier today. So gun none, missing meetings. He missed a lot of meetings probably in his last year or so. One meeting we were waiting for him to get to, and I was calling him, no answer, and he finally called me shortly before the meeting was going to start, and he said, hey, you're going to have to start the meeting without me. And I said, well, we can chill out for a little while. How far out are you? And he said, I'm not going to make it tonight. And I said, what do you mean? Where are you? How far away are you? And he said, I got on the wrong plane. I'm in, I think it was LA, but it was somewhere in California. Like he got on a plane in Florida, I think was where he was leaving from, and ended up in LA. So I immediately called the girl who I was dating at the time, who's a pilot for American Airlines, and I said, what are the odds that somebody's in Florida and gets on a plane, and instead of getting on the plane to Cleveland, they accidentally get on a plane to LA? And she said, it could happen, but the odds of it happening are extremely low.
Yeah. If you went to check-in at any airport, you're checking bags or you're checking, and I'm assuming if he's carrying jewelry back and forth, he's got carry-ons and he's going to have to go through that there. You're going to have a ticket. You're going to have a boarding pass.
Right.
To get on the wrong plane, they check your boarding pass before you even see.
Yeah, and then they announce how many times when you're sitting on the airplane, welcome to American 2374 nonstop to Cleveland,
Yeah.
So, but probably. Trying to think. I think this was 2 summers before he disappeared. He calls me up one day and he says, I'm doing this crazy diet. I got to eat this within the next 10 minutes. He calls me up and he says, I'm going on vacation. I said, oh, nice. And he said, yeah, I'm going to Miami for a week. I said, oh, awesome. I said, is Victoria and the girls coming? He goes, nope, just me. And I was like, oh, okay. And he said, I just need to get away. And I said, all right, I get it. And he says, must be nice being a single guy. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, you never have to ask anybody's permission for anything. You can just do stuff. He says, if you want something, you go out and you buy it. And he said, life must be easy being a single guy. And I said, well, Bryon, I said, grass is always greener on the other side. I said, because I never thought I'd be at this stage in my life, single, with no kids, not married. And he was like, oh, you got the big house, you got the nice car, you got 2 boats. He's like, you got everything every guy would want. And I just thought that was a very odd conversation for a guy that prided himself so much, or seemed to take so much pride in public with his 3 daughters.
Mm-hmm. Almost like he resented his...
Do you want them clean, or do you want Mike and I to mark them up again?
Yeah, if you just highlight them.
Okay, Mike, I got all the phone records. So whenever you have time, we'll sit down together.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
And that was about 2 years before he disappeared?
About a year and a half. It was the summertime.
Okay.
I think it was like June or July. Calls that Victoria heard. So, he said that she had heard these calls from this angry gentleman, and he's like, I would go out on the porch, or I would do whatever I could to get away from her so she couldn't, because it makes her uncomfortable. And she said, I've never heard any of these calls. She's like, I don't...
Victoria's told you that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We don't talk. We haven't talked since a week before the funeral?
Yeah.
Last time I physically had an exchange of words with her was the day the body was found. And she was sitting in the back of, I don't even know whose car it was, whatever car she was in Linda's driveway, when the coroner and the prosecutor and the sheriff all came over. Mm-hmm. And we were all kind of we wanted to get somewhere where we didn't think the media would have any clue to go to.
Right.
So,
to protect her as much as anything else.
Yeah, exactly. So he even went so far as to tell the fire department within about a week of his disappearance that there's this guy going to meet with him on Friday morning. This guy wants to kill him. This guy's pissed about the fire station. This guy calls and leaves him messages. They're meeting on Friday. They're meeting down here.
Who did he talk to over there? Do you know?
Josh Wilfong was definitely one of the people he talked to. I think Andrew Berger was somebody else that I recall saying that he had talked to him. Those are the 2 jumping out in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure who else.
Wilfong and Berger.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I think Wilfong's working today. I think I saw his car when I came in. Talking about angry reason. Okay. So Thursday, the service department had a trailer that they were getting ready for the visit from Santa. Our fire department does a visit from Santa every year, about a week and a half or so before Christmas. Santa goes out on a sleigh, and the sleigh's on a trailer being pulled by a fire engine or a pickup truck or something. Mm-hmm. We have 2 Santas, so we were getting the sleigh ready for the nighttime route and doing the lights and the generator and securing everything to it. And the service department had it over there, and the fire guys were over there. I'm trying to think who was there that day. Wilfong and Berger, I'm 99% sure were there over there just to see what all the cars were there and what was going on. And Bryon was in an exceptionally good mood for him. He's kind of a guy a lot of the time. But he was like laughing and carrying on. And if somebody's going to meet me the next morning and wants to kick my ass, I'm not up putting a trailer together and in a great mood about it, he's telling all these people this, and then he's asking me, he's like, do you want to go see Star Wars tonight? I hate Star Wars. And I'm like, no, not a Star Wars guy, not a Star Trek guy. Science.
Was he a Star Wars guy?
Apparently he was. He went to all the movies when on the opening night.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was like, oh, I got to see Star Wars tonight. It's opening night. I want to say the show was like 10:30, 10:20, 10:30. Mm-hmm. I'm like, Bryon, I don't want to see Star Wars. He's like, oh, I got to see it opening night. I got nobody. You got to go with me. And I'm like, look, ask everybody. I'll pay for your tickets. I don't want to go. I said, find somebody to go. If you don't find somebody to go, I'll go. He's like, all right, deal. So we had the Medina County Township Association Christmas party that evening, and it was at Winking Lizard in Brunswick on 303. Mm-hmm. So we all go up there, and I think he was asking Adam Frederick, one of the county commissioners, to go, but Adam was going out of town the next morning or had to go into work or something, so Adam couldn't go. So as the evening's going on, he's like, Mike, nobody can go. I've asked everybody, nobody can go. And I'm like, all right. So literally like 20 minutes before we left the party, I said, I'll go to Star Wars. So we leave the party. kind of follow each other up 42 to, I think it's Reagan, where the movie theater is up there, and go into the movie. I don't see his car. Like, he pulls in, and it's not a lot of cars in the parking lot. So I'm like, well, I'll walk in. And then I kind of see him coming from somewhere in the other area of the parking lot, and we go in, get our tickets. Excuse me, as we're walking into the show, he says, hey, can you call my wife and tell her you're here at the movie theater with me? And I said, I don't have her number. He's like, how do you not have her number in your phone? I said, I've had no reason to call her, ever. I said, how do you not know her number? I said, where's your phone? He said, oh, my phone's dead. I said, you don't know her number off the top of your head? I said, I know my parents and all my siblings' numbers that's about all I know, but I said, how do you not know? He's like, I don't have her number. I said, all right, I'll send her a Facebook instant message. That's like the only other thing I could think of. So it's probably still on my phone. So I sent her a message and said, Victoria, I'm with Bryon. We're going to something along the lines. We could probably look it up. And said, going to the Star Wars movie starting at whatever time. Never heard anything back from her. So, I've hung out with Bryon socially. I've been to one, maybe two of his daughter's graduation parties. I've been to a Super Bowl party over at their house. He's been to parties at my house. But when we were walking into that theater and kind of made the left and started up the steps and into a row, it's like the hair on the back of my neck just stood up. I had this weird feeling like something was not right. And he walked into the movie theater. He went into the fourth seat, and I was like, I'm not sitting close to him. So I sat on the aisle seat and left 2 seats between us. And we didn't talk much during the movie. And then as we were leaving, I still had this uneasy feeling. And we're walking out just kind of like two people that have never talked to each other. And we get out to the lobby, and he's like, you'll be there tomorrow morning, right? He had wanted me to come up here at 7:45 in the morning because this resident was going to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning. And he said, bring your gun. I said, Bryon, I have my gun on me most of the time anyway, but if I'm bringing my gun and you think somebody's showing up to beat your ass or kill you, I hope to God you've notified the police. And he says, yeah, Jim's going to be there. Jim Sanford, who was our liaison to the sheriff's office. And I said, I hope he's going to park his car somewhere so that it's not going to be sitting out and obvious. He says, yeah, we talked to Rick. Rick's going to leave a truck out. Jim's going to put the car in the garage. And Jim's going to be in the utility closet, which is literally right around the corner right here. And I was going to sit in the front office and pretend like I'm signing checks. So I feel like I'm scatterbrained and just running all. I'm trying to hit these things, and so long story short, I didn't even know he had asked Rick to come up here. Rick, our service director. So at 7:20 in the morning, I'm sitting on my couch, boxers, t-shirt, drinking a cup of hot chocolate, watching the morning news, and Rick calls me and he's like, "Where are you at?" And I said, I'm on my couch watching the news. In 10 minutes, I'm going to go up and brush my teeth, throw some pants on, and drive on up there. And he says, I need you to come up here now and hurry the fuck up. And Rick has never used that language with me, or there was just a uneasiness in his voice. And I was like, okay. So I don't even think I grabbed clean jeans. I think I grabbed the dirty jeans that were in the laundry pile in the laundry room, threw a sweatshirt on, put my gun on my belt, and out the door I went. And I was like, God, and it was a cold morning. It was 5 degrees. I remember seeing that 5 on my car like it was this morning. So I get up here, and Rick's truck is parked in the middle of that parking lot out there. I pulled up next to it because he's still in it, and he's like, go in that building. And I said, what do you mean go in that building? He's like, go in that building and see what's in there, meaning this building. So I opened the front door. I can't remember what lights were on. I think the main hall lights were on. And the lights back here in this room were on, but nothing was on anywhere else in the building. And the first thing I noticed were bloody footprints coming out the front door. And then in the back here, I could see a couple chairs on their side. The door open probably about halfway, and something on the floor. And Bryon's coat. Bryon never wore a jacket, a coat. Never saw him in a jacket or a coat. But we all had
reflectorized jackets.
Yeah, bright yellow. Yeah. So when the fire department bought them, the trustees all decided they wanted them. So all the trustees got one. And I don't recall ever seeing Bryon in that coat. And that coat was laying on the floor here. I pulled my gun out immediately, walked back here, looked behind the door, went in the garage, kind of walked through the garage really quick. I was thinking he was in here somewhere. looked in the utility closet. There was nothing in there. Turned the lights on, quickly ran through the front office, into the record room in the back, looked in the 2 bathrooms, and went right immediately back outside. And I said to Rick, I said, where are the cops? Why aren't they here yet? He said, I didn't call them. And I said, well, we need to call them. Like, no. Mm-hmm. So he called the cops. I called Linda, and I said, you need to come down here. I don't know what's going on, but it appears Bryan's missing. This building's got blood everywhere. And you probably need to get down here. So Jim Sanford was the first deputy to arrive. And I still had my gun in my hand when he got there. And he's like, put that away. What's going on? He came in and then kind of, I don't remember the exact order of events, whatever. But I know pretty soon other cruisers were showing up. The sheriff's detectives were showing up. And then BCI seemed like they got here within 20 minutes. I'm sure it wasn't that fast, but it seemed extremely fast that day. And we went into Rick's building to stay warm for a while because it was so cold. And then 2 of the sheriff's detectives took us over for questioning individually into the town hall. Okay. Just going off my list here. So a light burned out in the back. First off, our fiscal officer Shirley was always saying that people were in this building at night. We all thought she was nuts. So we're like, Shirley, nobody's coming into this office at night. She's like, no, this isn't the way I left it. This isn't the way I left it. One night she said her door was unlocked because she's got a door that goes to the outside from her office. And she said, I've never unlocked it. And I said, well, I'm not unlocking your door. I'm not moving shit around in your office. But when he disappeared, it all stopped. She never complained about that happening again. We always thought it was the nighttime sheriff's deputies coming in here. She's got a candy basket in there. I figured they're just going in there and sitting on a desk.
Keys for the
They had a key to this building.
Mm-hmm. Do you know that they actually came in?
They would, because they would tell us that they'd come in and use the bathroom. That was one of the reasons that they wanted to have someone to go to the bathroom when they were working the township beat in the middle of the night.
Was it just the guys assigned to the township or everybody in there? Okay.
Just the guys to the township that I'm aware of, yeah. We had problems with a light bulb on the back of this building always burning out. Like Rick would always be telling us in meetings or in passing, I don't know what the hell's wrong with that light. I'm putting light bulbs in that thing, every couple of weeks. And he said once Bryan went missing, he never had to replace a light bulb in there. Another thing is, I remember after Bryan was missing, it was summer, the summer following him being missing, Rick said to us one day, we were all sitting in the office, me and Kim, Shirley, he says, I'm sure glad you guys are done with that shredding. He said, and it had been done for a while. He said, that was ridiculous, the amount of shredding that was going on there. And I said, no, who's been shredding? We hadn't shredded since about a year before, I think. We'd have to look at the record retention. He was like, I was taking shredding out of there all last fall, big bags of shredding. And Kim's like, Rick, we haven't been doing any shredding. So, Shirley wasn't shredding. I'm not. Linda's not. None of the service guys were shredding. The only person we could figure was doing any shredding was Bryan.
It sounded like from when I talked to Rick that it was a large quantity of shredding too.
I've never hauled a bag of shredding out of there, but it's a big cabinet shredder.
It's like a garbage bag full.
Oh, he told me it's like an industrial bag. He said it's like a 50-gallon bag, 55-gallon bag. Yeah. So Linda told me she went over to his house the morning he disappeared, and she said, I wanted to get into his computer. I wanted to, try to find credit card statements to give to the police so that they could try to see if these cards are being used or anything. She said, I've never seen an office like it. She said, there was not a piece of paper to be had in that office of anything.
Wow.
I mean, I wish my kitchen table had no paper on it, let alone my office.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. He coached Medina high school football. I don't know if it was the freshman or the JV. And he used to pride himself on how hard he was on those guys. And then one day he's like, I got fired. And I don't know what the story is. Medina Sheriff didn't even know he coached Medina football when I brought it up to them months after he had disappeared. So, but he told Kim and me one day that he got fired for telling some kids that he was going to run their dicks into the ground, for making a comment about his daughter or something. And I was like, okay, that doesn't seem to me like something you're going to fire somebody over. Maybe suspend for a week or two or a couple of games or something.
Some kind of sensitivity
right.
or something.
Yeah. So I'd love to know what the real story behind that was. And then, I didn't think much of this until after, actually I thought about it like when they did their July press conference, the July after he went missing. I watched the press conference on Facebook Live or, one of the news things that broadcasted it. And I called Linda and I said, do you think Bryon was gay? And she said, absolutely not. Why would you think that? And I said, well, think about it. I said, he has been harassing me for years telling me I'm gay. And he's like, oh, you're gay. We all know you're gay. And he's like, oh, that hot blonde that you date now, she's just for show. And I mean, he was constantly on my case about this. And then I said, I said, in addition to that, he did this event called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes that was a fundraiser for domestic violence. And I think he wore a dress and wore high heels. And I saw a video, and he did it like a runway model. Yeah. And I asked Linda, I said, where do you think he got a pair of shoes for that? And she said, well, I'm sure from his wife or daughter. And I said, no. I said, Bryon was 280 pounds. His wife is 130 on her heaviest day.
Yeah.
I said, and their kids, none of their kids are 120, I'll bet. I said, none of them have a shoe that he can fit into. How did he get a pair of shoes and know how to walk in them like that as well as he did? And then she said, it's interesting that you're bringing this up to me. She said, because I was in the office and she didn't know exactly how, but it had been a while ago, and she said, he was like interrogating me for 45 minutes asking me if he thought you were gay, meaning me. And she said, after about 45 minutes into it, I said, Bryon, are you asking or are you wishing? Because it sounds like the latter. And she said his face got red and the subject changed and he walked out of the room and never heard any more discussion about it.
Did he ever talk to you, besides the times that you've said, did he ever talk to you about his sex life or anything?
No.
Either at home or extracurricular type activities or talk about women at all?
No. I mean, once in a while he'd be like, oh, she's a hottie, or I'd do her, or, we'd hire a young female firefighter and he'd be like, oh, look at that ass. But, I mean, nothing out of the, yeah.
Typical man-to-man.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to say joking around or whatever.
Yeah. Right. He rode with the sheriff's office a lot. Like, we'd be on a squad call, a fire call, and he'd show up in the sheriff's car a lot. And I was thinking, for a guy with a wife and 3 kids, what the hell is he doing out here in a police car all the time?
Especially night shifts.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you ride with anybody in particular? Or was
Jim Sanford, probably 98% of the time, if not 100% of the time. I can't say it was 100% of the time because he may have gone out with other guys, but I don't know that for sure. I mean,
did you know Stanford very well?
Sanford, S-A-N-F, yeah. Fairly well, because the Medina County Sheriff's Office incorporated a drone program right after I became a trustee, and I was one of the drone pilots for them, because at the time you had to be a licensed pilot to be able to fly a drone for public use.
You still do if you apply for government.
No, they actually changed that.
Oh, is that right?
Yep. You can, I believe, just do the ground school and then do a proficiency check. You still have to, but you don't have to be a.
We used to have to file out a flight plan.
Right.
And all that
They changed it.
That,
right. Yeah. You have to call the local FSDO or tower and let them know, the times you're going to be flying, what you're going to be flying over, all those types of things. But since Jim left, and
let me ask something about Jim. Is Jim a womanizer? From your experience?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I get the impression. Because I rode with him a few times right after I became a trustee.
When I say womanizer, I mean, is he subject to seeing ladies?
I think so.
So, would
and I can back that up. I can tell you what.
Would he and Bryon have brought people here?
I don't know. I've never had a inclination or anything.
Well, I'm just going along
that.
with what Shirley was saying and stuff being moved around and stuff like that. And, and he had keys and Bryon had keys and stuff like that. Just trying to, put the the peg in the right spot, so to speak. Yeah,
there is a fairly attractive female paramedic that works for Medina LST, and she's got a few years on her between then and now. But her name came up in conversation one night. And I said, I said, she and I are very good friends. I said, she's been out on my boat. I said, we hang out together on occasion. And Jim says, I could fuck her anytime I want. He's like, I could go up to that station and tell her to put these handcuffs on and get in the back of my car. And I was like, okay. I don't think so. But...
Was Bryon around when that was said?
No, it was just Jim and I in the car. Yeah. Because right after I got elected, he said, I want to take you around and show you areas of the township that you would never see. If you're a Joe resident, and unless you really know. Okay. And he did. We went to places that I never knew existed around here.
Okay. What do you think happened? What's your thoughts?
I don't know. I just have, my opinion that has nothing other than my gut thoughts. And, I think he spent a lot of time talking about something that doesn't sound like it existed, i.e. this angry resident, because, we were all out here by 8 o'clock. This parking lot was full of cars. There was no car that pulled in here and turned around. There was no car that slowed down that looked like they thought that they were pulling in here. The stories that he told people just were not consistent across the board.
But the gun thing.
Oh, yeah.
As an example. Did you ever talk to Sanford about his supposed to be here the morning that...
He had no clue. Yeah, because, I didn't. Kim got here shortly after Linda got here and the cops started getting here, and I don't even know how she found... I know what happened. I think Rick told me he called her to see if she was okay, because we had no idea.
Yeah, because she normally gets here at 8 o'clock.
8:30, I think. Yeah. And I think Bryon she told me that Bryon had told her not to come in until 9 that morning. And she also had said that Bryon was really kind of questioning her intently on what time does Fire get here? What time does Rick get here? When Rick gets here, what does he do? Where does he go? So it sounded like he was trying to do a lot of homework to figure out what people's normal routines were.
Yeah, what the movements would be.
Yeah. I personally think he tried to stage his own disappearance. And I don't know if he tried to stage his own disappearance and death, or if he tried to stage his own disappearance and something was south. I don't know. It was damn cold that morning.
Yeah, in other words, and correct me if I'm wrong, you think it's possible he staged his own disappearance, and in the process of that, he may have caused his own death.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I know...
Did you ever see him with a knife?
Not that I can recall.
I'm one of the guys that have carried a pocket knife since 10 years.
You're right, yeah.
Some guys do, some guys don't.
Right,
And I just wondered if he ever carried a pocket knife.
I never saw one. What was I going to say? There was something about Jim, too. When Kim got here, I guess Jim was walking up behind us. We were walking over to Rick's building to stay warm. And Kim gets out of her car and says, "And where the hell were you?" And I thought she was pointing at me because she was right in our face and pointing, and she was actually pointing at Jim, who was behind me, but I didn't know he was behind me. And she said, "You were supposed to be here. Bryon told us you were going to be here. Why weren't you here?" And I kind of remember her saying that, but I remember him saying, "I don't know what you're talking about," and basically do an about face and just kind of march away from us. So, if somebody said that to me, I would have been like, beware, why, who said this, trying to put some pieces together other than just, I don't know what you're talking about, and turn around and marching off. There was one more thing I was going to tell you. So the day he went missing, one of the deputies was sitting out here, and I said, what's going on? What have you guys searched? What do you guys haven't searched? And he's like, I don't fucking know. He's like, I mean, this is such a shit show. He's like, they're just literally sending people to look in this, and he's like, I don't know if anybody's gridded anything off. I don't know if anybody has got good accurate notes of what we searched, what we didn't search. So, obviously the first few days we were going over there, Kim, myself, Kim's husband, Linda, we were over there, a few times a day, every day, if not a few times a day in the first initial days. And I was talking
over where?
I'm sorry, Victoria's house. Yeah, Bryan's house. Mm-hmm. So I was talking to Jim. I think it was at a car accident that happened at the corner of Ryan and 162. And we were talking about Bryan, and he said, Bryan's alive. He's not here, but he's alive. And I was like, how do you know? And he's like, I can't get into it, but I know. And then a day or two later, I saw Jim somewhere. And he was like, hey, I need you to do something for me. And I'm like, what do you need? And he says, I need you to walk around the back of Bryan's house at night and see if he's in there. And I said, Jim, there is no fucking way I am walking into somebody's backyard in the middle of the night to see if there's somebody in that house. Ain't happening. He says, well, I can't do it, but you can legally. And I said, maybe legally, but it ain't happening. I am not doing that.
You live real close to Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, as the crow flies, we probably live a half mile from each other.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Driving, maybe 3/4 of a mile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we live real close.
He would ask you that.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that's what I thought. So those are kind of my bullet points that I just made some quick notes earlier on in the day.
It's a perplexing case, to say the least. Some of the stuff is so inconsistent that I've run across. It's not typical of an abduction. It's not typical of an extortion. It's not typical of a homicide. I mean, there's so many different things that don't jive.
Yeah.
And I've seen quite a few of all of those, and
Sure.
The phone calls as an example. That's I don't understand that. What phone service did you have that it wouldn't allow you that you were using when you got the
same one I have now, Verizon. I've had Verizon as long as I can remember.
Verizon's pretty good. That's why I'm surprised that they couldn't pick that up.
Every call that I could find was there. I'm trying to think. I can't remember if we're still in the call history. Probably not. This call history usually only goes back 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. Mine blanks it on the first of the month or something.
Oh,
like
okay.
that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Was Bryan adept with digital stuff, phones and stuff like that?
I don't know. I mean, we never really talked about it, but...
Did you ever see him with other phones? Besides his whatever phone he had.
I usually saw him with...
Did you ever see him with 2 phones or more phones?
No, but one day we were having a discussion in there, and he said something about, my iPhone, and I said, you don't have an iPhone? You've got a Note 8 or a Note whatever he had at the time, Note 6. He had a big phone. He had a thing that flipped open on it, and he was always doing the stylus. And he was like, oh yeah, that's right. And I thought, maybe I don't know if I have a Note 8 or a Note 10, but I sure as hell know if I have an iPhone or a Droid, I mean, they don't even operate close. But, one weird thing is, and I think it came up, I know they were asking me about it when the phones came. Alice is crazy. I mean, whenever we have a problem with the phone company, we sick her out of them because she gets what she wants.
She's relentless, huh?
Yeah. But she got 2 new phones for the ambulances. And for whatever reason, Bryan took them and didn't tell any of us about them because one from the fire department broke or went missing or something, and we needed these phones, and we're searching the office high and low, and Bryan ended up having them at his house. I mean, why would you take any township property home is beyond me. I have no idea.
Well, the phone he used, his personal phone.
Yeah.
That's his actual personal phone. Did he use that for township business?
We all use our personal
Okay, so you
phones.
use your personal.
Yeah.
So you're not issued a phone by
Correct.
the township.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because.
Which is probably bad in the long run, but.
Well, the worst problem you get is probably if somebody gets into a situation where they want your information.
Exactly.
They can issue a search warrant and
Right.
whatever you have that
Right.
is outside of the whatever they're looking for is accessible in that,
Yeah.
that sense.
Yeah.
But
no, I mean, we're pretty frugal around here. We we're as tight as we can on our pennies. I mean, we would not use. Alice has a township phone, and our attorney has a township phone, and that's it.
Okay. Is there anything I haven't asked or that we haven't talked about that you think might be pertinent to this?
Not that I can think of right now. I mean, I'm sure as soon as I get in my car and start driving to the airport, I'm going to have 20 things pop into my head.
You got to pick your. You got to go for your test tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hold you up much.
No, I mean, as long as I get out of here by 4:30, I'm good.
Well, we're getting close. So.
Okay.
Something comes up, you think about something, it's just a wild hair. Give me a call, let me know. You got my cards, got my numbers on it.
Yep.
So
Yep.
if I don't answer, leave a message. I'll call you back as soon as I can.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
So.
I mean, just, probably the things that stand out most in my mind is how he really wanted to get, and he was telling people at the Christmas party about this. I mean, I remember him telling, here's something that's always stood out in my mind. Christina Fazio is the director of EMA, Emergency Management Agency here in Medina County. They went to high school together in North Royalton. So, they'd always kind of chat a little more than he would with most other politicians. So they were talking, and I walked over because I sit on the EMA executive committee, and we're talking, and Christina says, "Bryon, when are you going to move up to a higher office?" And he says, "What do you mean?" And she says, "When are you going to run for commissioner or something?" And he says, "Oh, there's too many skeletons in this closet." He said, "Nobody gives a shit about a township trustee." He said, "Once you go above the township level, people start looking into your past." He said, "And there's too much there that."
When did that happen?
The night of the Christmas party that
right?
That night, yeah.
Did he ever tell you about it? Any skeletons in the closet?
No. Nope.
That makes it sound like he must have had some.
Right. Yeah. Right. Or a lot of people think he had some, and he was telling her about the guy that wanted to, that was coming to meet with them. So, he sure as hell went out of his way, in my opinion, to make sure that as many people that he could tell about this knew about it.
This scenario.
Yeah.
But the people that he should have told, the sheriff's office, and
his wife,
and that stuff he didn't tell.
Yeah.
It's curious.
I mean, I've had one person threaten to kill me as a trustee, and he went to jail.
Yeah.
The first thing I did was call the sheriff's office.
Yeah, especially if, I've been in law enforcement for a long time, and I always tell people, you better be ready to back the threat up, because your next stop is, you want a Gray Bar Hotel.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put up with your threats. You might think they're idle, but I don't take them as idle.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you got my card. If you're talking to somebody, sometimes when we go out and talk to people, it'll stir something, kind of stir the pot, and someone will come forward and say, "Hey, I thought about this. You hear something like that, let me know. Give me a call."
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well. Thank you.
Hopefully I can get some answers and we can figure out what happened.
That's what we all want, I mean, and that's what, obviously his family wants. My fear is it's going to be something that we don't want to know. So
we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope you can. I hope that this comes to light, whatever it is. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay. Good luck in your test.
Thank you.
Funny how the passage of time makes certain memories come into focus, or maybe it just helps build a better story. Michael Costello's 2016 version was simple. His 2019 version, it's padded, polished, and full of new revelations that sure sound like they were workshopped after the fact. In Tentacle Nation, we don't take memories at face value. We check the tape, we rewind, and when the story changes, we hit pause. This is the infamous ex-chief. Stay loud, stay skeptical, shake the system until the truth falls out.